Welcome back, everybody, to another video going from zero to producer in 90 days. I'm your instructor, Torbjorn. Even if you've never produced or never made music before, we're going to learn all the easy tricks and tips so that you can start making beats in Ableton today. Let's get started. Today is all about synthesizers and MIDI basics. And let's quickly review what we talked about last time. We were exploring the browser categories last video, looking at sounds and instruments and how we can quickly try some ideas and hot swap out different sounds while still keeping our same chord or notes. And we were getting into instrument racks and audio effects racks and learning how to use macros to easily control things within our instruments or to control multiple things with one knob, which is pretty handy. So we're going to dive straight into it today, but a couple things we got to download before we get into that. As always, I'm finding loops on Looperman. First thing I did was grab a drum beat, and I think I ended up with this thing, hip hop beat number 1. Click the download button, downloaded the clip, and tossed it into Ableton. So if you want to follow along, quickly search for that hip hop beat 1. And the other thing, I did a Google search for free MIDI chords, and the top of the list was a blog post by Splice. Went ahead and downloaded those free chords, and in that folder was, lo and behold, a bunch of free MIDI chords. Super helpful. We're going to be using those before we're getting into the theory and creating our own chord progressions. We still want to be able to experiment with this stuff and not need to know all the in-depth theory just yet. So grab those. That'll be useful in this lesson. And let's talk about what a synthesizer is. Well, it's basically an instrument. Typically, it's played with a piano keyboard, as you can see here by all of these synthesizers. And it uses electric waves or electricity or a thing called an oscillator to generate a tone. And it just generates an electric wave, and that wave repeats over and over and over, and it causes a speaker to move, and then we perceive that as a note or multiple notes. So I wanted to quickly talk about the fundamentals of a synthesizer. We're going to look at this super fast, handy graphic that Lander put together, and just talk about the different parts of a synthesizer. We're actually going to also use an instrument in Ableton called analog, which I think is the easiest way to experiment with this. So let's go ahead and drag an analog instrument onto a MIDI track. We can play some notes with it. The oscillator is what generates the sound. So if you think about all different kinds of instruments, have all different ways of making sound. Guitars, you plug a string. Piano, it has a mallet that hits a string. Vibraphone or a glockenspiel or something like that, you're hitting something that's vibrating with an exciter or a mallet. Well, in this instrument, it's just an electrical wave. And so the shape of the wave is like determining what type of strings it has or like what type of mallet you're hitting it with. Sine wave. Down the list, we get a sawtooth wave. Little buzzier sounding. Down below that, we get a square wave. Even more buzzy and ringy sounding. And then we get this like random wave, which has some noise in there too. So that's what we start with, and then we've got different things that we can control that sound with. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to my sawtooth wave. And the next thing in line is we have a filter. What a filter does is it changes or removes part of the sound that's created by the oscillator. So like in this case, we have this thing called the LP, that's a low-pass filter, and so it's just going to slowly but surely start carving away those high-pitched noises. So you can hear as I drag this back, that the sound starts to get more dull. Some of that buzziness goes away. After that, we have an envelope. Envelope can control quite a few things, but by default, an envelope typically controls like the volume. So is it a sound that gets loud instantly, like this one? Or are we dragging the attack back of this envelope to have it fade in over a longer period of time? This is where that handy graphic by Lander comes in. what is ADSR? Those are the things that control or that make up an envelope. Attack, decay, sustain, and release. So if you think about it in that order, attack is the first part of the sound. How fast does the sound get to full volume from when you press the play button or when you press your note on your keyboard? Decay is after it reaches full volume. What happens after that? Does it stay at full volume? Does it go back down and get quiet? And then how long does it stay or sustain in that middle part? And then when you let go of the note, how long does it take from you releasing the key to have the sound completely disappear? All pretty simple beginner synthesis stuff, but there can still be a little bit of confusion. So let's look at a couple examples. So we looked at what happens when you drag the attack all the way up. It fades in over time. Let's drag that attack all the way down, and I'm going to drag the sustain down to 0, and let's shorten the decay. So right now we're going to hit the sound, it's going to start playing, and then it's going to get quieter. And then this decay determines how long it takes to get quiet. So if we take it really, really low, we can get like a super short, plucky sound. Let's drag that all the way down. So that's with the sustain all the way at 0. If we were to bring some of that up, then we still get that pluckiness. It just doesn't disappear immediately. Really loud first part of the note, really quiet middle part of the note. We can drag that release all the way up as well, and I'm going to let go of the keys, and you'll see that it takes a moment to fade away. So those are your 4 main things that make up an envelope: attack, decay, sustain, and release. Definitely take a moment to identify what those do, play around with them on your synthesizer, and then let's move on to, last but not least, the LFO. LFO is like a thing that's going to make changes to the sound that are constantly changing. So it is a wave, just like our oscillator is, but it's not actually playing a note. It's just using that as like a control parameter. So imagine that the wave all the way at the bottom is like the equivalent of you turning a knob all the way down. The wave moving all the way up to the top is the equivalent of you moving the knob all the way up on anything. Could be the filter, it could be another effect, all kinds of stuff. So let's look here. I'm going to put our LFO all the way up here in the filter section. And it's as if I'm moving that knob, but I don't actually have to control it. So you can connect an LFO to the filter like we did here. You can connect it to the pitch. You can connect it to all kinds of different stuff. Anywhere you see this LFO control here, you drag it up or down, and it will start to move. It'll start to move that parameter automatically for you. We could do it with the volume. Oh, that's interesting. That's panning. So that's automatically causing the panning to move from left to right. That's causing the volume to change. So see, just with a couple knob twirls here, the LFO, you can like really make a lot of interesting things happen with your sound. All right, so let's take a quick peek at a couple other synths. We're not going to dive into the more advanced synths in Ableton just yet, but I do want those 4 main things: oscillator, filter, envelope, and LFO. I do want to just identify on some other synths right now where we can find those things. So the ones that I use a lot, I think everybody that uses Ableton uses these a lot, are Operator and Wavetable. So let's quickly look at Operator. It's got 4 sound generators. Here you can choose a different wave and a different envelope for each one of these. So you can see as I click through the different menus and make changes, it's just specific to that one. So it's combining different sounds. We've got an LFO section over here on the right that we can turn on and choose what type of wave and what type of destination is it controlling. We've got a filter section. We can have, we have an envelope for this filter as well here. So you can have the filter change like with the LFO, or you can have it change by this envelope shape, which is really cool. We also get a pitch envelope, so it gives you an envelope that controls the pitch just right there automatically in the menu. And there's some global options here. In a later video, when we dig into Operator, we'll look at what some of this stuff does. But it's like how you control your pitch bend or how many notes can play at the same time and what is happening with those 4 sound generators, what order you have them playing in, or how they're communicating with each other. More on that later. Let's take a quick look at Wavetable. Wavetable here, it's got a sub oscillator. It's got 2 oscillators that you can combine or have play separate notes or have different sounds, different source generating tones. It's got 2 poles here for the filter. So it's like one filter kind of that works together, but it's got 2 different controls on it. And we got a couple different envelopes and a couple different LFOs that we can control. What's really interesting about the Wavetable is this matrix section. So like any of your LFO shapes can control any parameter. Like if I were to click here on, let's say, the frequency number 2, you can see that this bottom control on the matrix shows up here. And then now I can get that LFO to communicate with that parameter. As I click on another one, it just adds another lane here down to the matrix. And then maybe this one I want to be controlled by a different LFO. Again, pretty advanced for this video. I don't want to dive too much deeper into it than that, but just know that there's some really powerful stuff under the hood. And if you understand the fundamentals of what an oscillator does, what a filter, envelope, LFO does, then the point that I'm trying to get here is that if you grab any of these presets and you find one that's pretty close to the vibe that you like, but you're like, oh, something's not right about it. It's too bright or the sound lasts for too long. Then if we understand those synthesizer fundamentals and where to go grab those controls, then it gets pretty easy to grab presets and start customizing from there. Definitely start with analog. There's not a whole lot of submenus. You just click on a section here and it pulls up this display in the middle. It's probably the most simple to get into, so I recommend starting there. All right, now I want to talk about some MIDI effects. Man, MIDI effects, super underrated. I'm going to switch my screen over here. We've pulled this drum loop in, and I've done my Food Network bit here where I pre-baked a pie, and I'm going to pull it straight out of the oven. So let's go through the MIDI effects menu and take a look at the 4 that I use the most often. Same as audio effects, you've got lots of presets here, so make sure you take a look at those. I've just dragged some clips in here, and I've found a preset on the analog synthesizer, and I'm playing them against this little drum break beat. So here's where we're starting with. I've got everything off with all of our effects. We're just listening to the bare bones. I like that chord progression, but it's a little low. There's lots of ways that we could do this. You could go in here and you could grab all these notes and you could make the pitch go higher. But it's a little easier, I think, to just throw this pitch MIDI effect on there. You can just grab this one that says plus 12, and then all of a sudden, it's an octave higher. We can hot swap that out for the plus 24. That's pretty easy. Sounds better when it's pitched up like that. Now let's take a listen to the velocity effect. So velocity is recording how hard you hit a note. For a lot of us that are producing on laptops, or we don't have lots of instruments or a MIDI controller maybe, or you're using your keyboard like I am to play all of your notes, it doesn't record that velocity for you. So it just makes, if we look at our clip here, it just makes all of these velocities here like the same. They're all 100. I think maybe on this clip a few of them are different, but that's not enough. If we want to capture that human feeling and not just have everything super loud like this, that's cool, but it's it just lacks some emotion. So I grabbed this preset here on Velocity called Add Some Random. Let's turn that on, and all it's going to do is it's going to take all of those notes that are just played at the same volume, and it's just going to pick some random volumes that are a little bit louder or a little bit quieter, just like a real human being would naturally do if you were to play that instrument. So all of a sudden, it's like taking that just ignorantly loud aspect away, and it's adding something that feels a little more like it has an emotion to it. That's Velocity. Let's take a look at Chord. This is kind of a weird example. I'm going to, because this loop already is playing chords. But we can change those chords even more. I've grabbed this preset that's called Major Chord, and it's going to take every note and it's going to stack these 2 extra pitches on top of it. 4 semitones up, and then another one 7 semitones up. So that's kind of weird when it's already playing chords. If I just play one note at a time, with the chord effect on, it turns that single note into a major chord. We can go through here on our shift 1 and take that from 4 semitones down to 3, and then that makes it a minor chord. Nice and easy. So if you're not like a chord person, but you still want to have that vibe of cool chords, the Chord MIDI effect can just turn one note into a chord for you. There's lots of different presets here. If we pop open the chord menu, I'll just hot swap a couple other ones out and show you. Debussian. That one's pretty cool. Eternal Sunshine. Just like nice and easy. I'm just pressing one button. That one's kind of funky. We've got a bunch of different options. All right. Now, I think this is definitely the king of all MIDI effects, and that is the Arpeggiator. So I've got one more chord progression I'm going to show you. That's great, but if we wanted to create a melody out of that and we like the chords, Arpeggiator can start to take those chords and split them up into different notes and play them at different times. So I've got a preset here called Ubiquitous. I'm just going to drop that on from the Arpeggiator menu, and let's just take a listen to like what some of the presets will do. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to duplicate this track. So we've got the chords. So I'll take the Arpeggiator off one of them, and then we'll play both of them together. So you can hear how the chords and then the arpeggiated melody work in tandem together. It might even work better if we hot swapped the instrument real quick. So let's find something else. I'll grab a pad. I bet that cherry pad will work nice. Let's take a listen now that we've separated the instruments. Can turn that pad down a little. That's cool. We can go back to our MIDI effects here. That pad maybe is a little bit high. So let's go to our pitch and grab a -12. Just quickly shift it down an octave. Now that we've separated the pitch of those two, we can hear them separately a little bit better. Awesome. So like just really quick things that took those chord presets and like started to make them unique. Arpeggiator, man. Such a powerful tool. I'm going to just hot swap a couple different Arpeggiator presets just so we can hear some more options. This one's called Houseier Than Thou. Classic up down. So as you can see, lots of powerful tools, easy ways to start making music with free resources and just the stuff that comes with it. Also, remember how automation works. We talked about that a little bit in a previous video. Anything that you can control a knob for, you can always right-click and say Show Automation in New Lane. The rate of an arpeggiator or the frequency of a filter on a synthesizer, right-click, Show Automation in New Lane is your friend. Lots of presets. Remember to hot swap. So Google free MIDI chords. That's how I found those chords from Splice, but there's lots of other resources out there. Of course, always finding drum loops and stuff real free and real easy and royalty-free, more importantly, on that Looperman website. Remember your synthesizer fundamentals. Oscillator makes the initial tone. Filter is like an EQ or like something that's going to take some of that tone away or change it. Envelope is going to make your volume change over time. Remember, we were able to make that slow fade-in sound, or we were able to make that plucky sound by taking the sustain way down. Release, when you let go of the note and it plays out for a little bit longer. Lots of different virtual instruments in Ableton, but the fundamentals are all the same. MIDI effects are a great way to transform your clips quickly and easily. Again, there's lots of presets there. Thanks everybody for tuning in, watching another lesson, diving into MIDI stuff. Happy producing. Thanks again to Ableton for 90 days free trial of Ableton Live. And if you're making something interesting or if you have any questions, send me a DM. I'd love to hear what you guys are working on and stay connected. Have a good one out there.